What is happening out there, rotoscouts basketball fans? Nothing like a crash zoom to my face to start the show, huh? Just getting everything situated over here. Little Wednesday hump day action show. Trying to find, I'm hoping somebody bails out of the big FanDuel contest. I didn't get an entry into it. So I'm keeping an eye on it, hoping one pops up that I can jump in there and steal. That's what I was just checking, but I've got a placeholder just sitting there in the other contest that I want to switch over. So that's what I was checking there. We've got an interesting little 6-gamer, 7:30 start. A couple decent games on tap. Should be a good one. Looks like we've got a good little quorum here already. 10, 11 people hanging out just to start the show. Cujo Blues here. Hope your hump day's going well too, Cooch. Matthew Patterson, Spencer King, Insane Pump, and Terry We Trust. Ooh, I love it. Gotta get that printed on some money. Both Travises are here. Could be Travis Wyndham. Aloysius is here. Could be Travis up in the crane today. Love it. Travis say it's one of their like 150, 2,000 entry, 100K type of contests. They put in a second one that's like 300 and change with 10K up top. That is not the one I'm looking for. But yeah, that one would have been nice to jump into. DraftKings running another one of the really big $4 100K to first. Pretty awesome that they're starting to do that on fairly regularly. Probably going to keep that rolling, I would think. They've got their big experiment coming up with no late swap. Seems like they're trying to make a little bit more publicly friendly, attractive to the public, attractive to people who just like to play, like to put in like, just seeing my sideburns are going like, whoosh. Need a haircut, need a beard trim, need all of it. But it seems like they're really leaning in toward trying to get a little bit more public action going, which I think is good. I think it's good for the industry. I think it's good for the format. It'll be interesting to see how the no late swap lands. See whether people like it, whether it continues, whether they don't. I prefer it. I'd rather have no late swap than the chopped slates. Even from a coverage standpoint, like it makes it, we'll get into probably more speculative type stuff where like, all right, this is the way that this situation seems. So I'm choosing to project it this way versus other places might expect a guy to play or might expect a guy to sit and go a different way. So we'll probably see a little bit more of that in the coming weeks if it sticks. I know it's just an experiment to start, but it'll be interesting. Something to keep an eye on. And look, I'm just glad they're trying new things instead of just cranking out the same old contests every day. And I have no real issues with everybody's going to be on the same tier, right? Everybody's going to have that same restriction. So if I can't late swap, I can't late swap. It frees up my evening, to be quite honest. I won't have to sit here till 10 o'clock waiting for changes, having to update the site and everything. So works for me. We'll see how it goes. Of course, what'll suck is DraftKings will do that, and then FanDuel never will, so you'll still have to sit here all night paying attention. Yeah, it's a good point, Steven. It's not necessarily a new thing, just kind of going back to the old way. Yeah. That is a good point. I really don't have any issues with it. I was always fine with it before they had it. Fine with how it is now, except for the chopping off late games kind of thing. And I'm fine with going back to it. Whatever keeps the contests full, whatever enables them to run more reasonable buy-in, decent payout type contests, I don't mind. So if that's more appealing to the public that way, I'm all for it. Casuals will also get mad when a player gets ruled out and they can't swap. Yeah, I mean, I do agree that people will, get upset by that, but I think a lot of people will be going into it like eyes open to that situation, right? People will be saying, people who have been frustrated, casuals who have been frustrated all this time with not being able to change, we'll see it, I think, more as, well, now those guys are stuck with that guy too. And if everybody's taking that same zero, then it just balances, right? So it depends. People will be upset. As with everything, you can't please everybody. People are going to be upset one way or the other. People are going to leave. People are going to come in, bounce in and out. So, but like I said, I do think that it's a good thing to try. I like that they're trying different things. Mom is tired of late swap. I'm tired of late swap. I am. I'm not. Yeah, he's here. Phil spotted the tail coming in back behind me here. Good boy. Why don't you go lie down? Show's just starting. You got a little time to wait. Picked a bad time to come over. Go lie down. He's a good boy. Yes, good boy. If you want a solid tearjerker, the ending from Monday night's Daily Show. Jon Stewart talking about his pooch. It was trending all day yesterday or the day before, whenever that was. Yesterday, I guess. I think people are still talking about it. Touching but sad, as these things get. Sir Spence the King just smoked up. He's going to do his research now. I love it. Immense Evans, no, DraftKings is tomorrow, Friday, running a no late swap contest. So that's going to be DraftKings. FanDuel typically will follow suit with something that DraftKings does. DraftKings was the first one to start chopping the late games. FanDuel immediately started, so I expect they'll follow immediately along if it catches on. Mamba finished top 20 again last night because he couldn't late swap. Would you have late swapped yourself higher, or would you have late swapped yourself out of the top 20? Yeah, I saw that, Steven. That Stewart jumped on and thanked people for their stories and their and everything and making him trend and all. Just, tugs on the heartstrings a little. So an interesting slate. Let's take a look at. I'll pull the board up here so you don't have to stare at me. Norm Powell Day, Andre Drummond Day. A couple interesting names up at the top, but let's look at. We'll start with the Vegas board. Dallas, Toronto, opening things up. Dallas, Toronto, and New Orleans, Indy are the two early games. Dallas favored by 3 on the road in Toronto. 241 point total in that one. Pretty high-end game there. New Orleans and Indy, I think, is also a fairly high-end game. Indy favored by 6.5 at home. 237.5 points on the board on that one. Then we dip. We take a big step down. Cleveland, Chicago. Cleveland favored by 5.5 on the road. Just a 216 point total. And then things get even worse. Memphis and Minnesota. Minnesota favored by 12.5 at home. 208.5 point total. That is a low-end DFS game. That's one of the lower totals I think we've seen all year. I don't remember a lot of sub 212, 210 kind of totals this year. That is really, really low. Sacramento, Denver picks us back up, 231 point total. Denver favored by 7 at home. And then the Battle of Los Angeles to end the night. Clippers favored by 3.5 over the Lakers. 234 points in that one. Some decent star power coming out of that game, obviously. But as we can see, we do have a couple value names up at the top of the board, or mid-range values, right? Andre Drummond's not priced so cheap that he's ridiculous, crashing through the top of the board. Like we've seen him when he comes in at a backup price. He's priced kind of for this role now. Maybe not quite to where he should be, given how strong he still looks at these higher prices. But it's not the crazy, crazy, super inexpensive Andre Drummond day. But he looks fantastic. We're getting 65% of them on FanDuel, 70% of them on DraftKings. The win rate on FanDuel, a little bit low, 26.7. Center only over there, center only on DraftKings, but obviously we can get multiple bites at the apple with the util spot. 43% win rate on DK at 5,200. So he looks really interesting to me today. Norm Powell in the starting lineup, 61.8% win rate at 4,800, shooting guard small forward on the DraftKings slate. 4,800, same price on FanDuel, has an even higher win rate. Got him in most of the top 150. So those two guys are your key value pieces of the day. Terrence Mann kind of in that group as well. And then we get into a bit more of a spread out board. But two pieces are pretty decent chalk here. Especially Andre Drummond. 1.39 points per minute, 1.35 on DraftKings. Plenty of upside for Drummond. So a couple, and things will probably change when we get into some of the injury news here. And we'll take a look at that. But right now we do come into the slate with two kind of go-to spots. In terms of the injuries, as of the 4:15 update, and I'll double check. Let's see if we got anything else in over the last little bit. Thursday, NBA denies Knicks' protest of loss to Rockets, but they gave them a game back in that win over the Pistons the other day, so that's okay. Zubac was downgraded to questionable around 2 o'clock. Trey Murphy was also downgraded to questionable during the day. So we'll see what happens with those two guys. But overall, probables, Luka, Dante Exum, Derek Lively, Cody Zeller's available, Anthony Davis probable, Cam Reddish probable, Giannis probable, Marjon Beauchamp probable. Questionable, Chris Boucher, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson. So that could be interesting for the New Orleans side of that game. Aaron Nesmith, Alex Caruso, Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, Darren Fox, LeBron James, Zubac, and Andre Jackson Jr. all questionable. Maxi Kleber is doubtful. Jonte Porter, Jose Alvarado, Dyson Daniels, Torrey Craig, Zach LaVine, Patty Williams, Desmond Bain, Luke Kennard, John Conchar, also doubtful. Scottie Pippen Jr., Marcus Smart, Kyle Anderson, Sasha Vezenkov, Jared Vanderbilt, Christian Wood, Paul George, and Chris Middleton are all out. So Paul George continuing to be out, create some of that Clippers value. We've got some value in potentially in Minnesota, depending on what goes on around Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert. Karl Anthony Towns not on the injured list, but dropping Slow-Mo out of that group. He's out already, Kyle Anderson. That could create some opportunity depending on who suits up, who doesn't. So that's one to watch. New Orleans is definitely one to watch. Zion already looks pretty decent. Could potentially trend upward if we get a couple few pieces, assuming he goes. He's also questionable. Ingram was projecting well, but looks like he didn't really hit the top of the board Sims-wise. Where is he? He's got to be in here somewhere. He's projecting really well. Ingram looks better on FanDuel right now. But again, all of Ingram, CJ, Trey Murphy, and Zion are questionable right now. So a lot of spots to watch for a not gigantic slate. Ironically, it was the one Luka lineup you told me to make, but like I said yesterday, you had the lock button Moody if you wanted Luka for the win. Yeah, that Luka game, what did he put up, like 85 on the FanDuel scale? I was calling it out, as you're saying there. You know, it's when it comes up zero of a guy like Luka, I always want to point that out, talk about potentially grabbing shares, and that's what we see with. And I don't know that he was in the winning lineups, but that was the monster score of the day, right? So that just illustrates the value in considering some of those guys, even when they don't necessarily sim out. But it also illustrates that he needed to get into the 80s to pay off that ridiculously high salary. Even as it was still only like 6x and change. So it wasn't crazy. It was a crazy high score relative to every other score on the board, but relative to his own salary, it wasn't that high, right? It wasn't like a 10x kind of a game. Not that you're going to get 10x out of a $12,000 guy in the winning, but not the optimal. That makes a lot of sense, Dave. So let's get into this one. All right, good boy. Why don't you go lie down? There he goes. Now he's got the hint. Talk about some guards. So again, Powell, Terrence Mann, a lot of run. Mann coming up at 42% winner on FanDuel, 51% of the top 150. Just a 0.65 per minute guy. Played 39 minutes the other night, put up 25 FanDuel points. That's not going to get us there at 5,000. We need better than that. Very low end usage. It's a guy that definitely comes with a bit of an asterisk about what that potential production looks like, what that ceiling really looks like. Let me get to and we'll just do November. Paul George. 354 minutes over the course of the entire season with no Paul George. For Terrence Mann, he's been a .66 per minute player. So right at where he's been for the season. So it comes with some expectation of landing in this territory around his median projection, obviously, but the ceiling I do think is a little bit capped. We're talking about a 12.8% usage rate. He doesn't have to get crazy far. He looks better to me for the salary. Well, it's about even actually. 44 on DraftKings, 5,000 on FanDuel. 37.8% win rate, 42% win rate, 51% of the top 150. It's just a price that works given where he's projected, but if there's a basement on somebody, if there's a guy who could potentially tank some otherwise good lineups, Terrence Mann's definitely on that list. Norm Powell's on that list too, let's be honest, but .78 is a lot better than .65, .81, .66. There's a pretty big gulf between those. Malik Monk, 6,500, 5,600. Not a bad option. That game's, 231 point total? Not the highest, but certainly not the lowest of the day. It's the lowest total among the four, high-end games at 231. You got 237.5, 234, 231, and 241. And then that 208.5 and the 216. But those are pretty negligible. I think Monk is a functional piece of mid-range. A functional mid-range option on FanDuel, 9% win rate, 6% of your top 150. On DraftKings, he looks a lot different. For 5,600 on DraftKings, shooting guard, small forward, he's landing in 26% of the winners. He's landing in 30% of the top 150. So we're getting him a little bit out ahead of the field, I think. Let me double check that. RG changed their logo on the tab. Like, how the tabs come with on a browser have the little space for a logo. So they changed it, so now my brain doesn't know where to click when I go to look for that tab. Monk is owned mid-teens. So we're essentially doubling up the ownership on Monk on DraftKings. Looks like an interesting option. 24% usage, 1.08 FanDuel points, 1.12 DraftKings points per minute on the season. RJ, looking pretty all right. 14.3% on FanDuel, 16% of the top 150. Just looking for the other pieces from Toronto because they always kind of go together. Scotty Barnes, 18.6% winner, 14% of the top 150 on FanDuel. Looks like RJ holds up better on DraftKings by comparison. And then Quickly's down here. So Quickly at 7,000 among these Toronto guys, the lower end guy among the quote unquote big three. On FanDuel, he looks all right. 26.5% win rate, 16% of the top 150. Probably a little popular. Oops. That wasn't what I wanted to click on. We'll just let this reload real quick. Yeah, so we're below the field on IQ on FanDuel. The projected ownership is kind of in the territory of what this win rate is, so we're taking 10, 12, somewhere around there, points off the public ownership. Still looks playable, given the win rate. I think he's just a little bit popular. He's been around 0.93 since joining Toronto, 0.96 for the season. I've got him somewhere in this territory, I think. Closer to the season-long number than the since joining Toronto number. But obviously does have his scoring-based upside days. RJ's been at 1.0, low 1.0s. I've got him, I think, again, right around 1.0 for tonight. At 7,200 small forward only, he's looking decent on FanDuel in the mid-teens. And he's hitting the board pretty well at 6,800 on DraftKings. Shooting guard, small forward, 22.6% of the win rate, 20% of the top 150. On FanDuel, RJ's owned in the low teens. Why won't this? Why did they change how this works? That's so dumb. That doesn't open as an individual link anymore. All right. Just do a quick little one of these. DraftKings. Subtle, stupid little changes. In the drop down, you used to just be able to like right click and pop open a new tab from that link, but that doesn't work anymore. Totally irrelevant for you guys. RJ, the highest owned Raptor on the DraftKings slate. Makes sense. We're a couple points ahead. Not many. Just a handful of points ahead of the field here at 20%. The 22% win rate gives me confidence in that. I think you can get them out to 22 and change percent in terms of your exposure. 25 is probably okay. And then Scotty is right here. Scotty at 18.6% winner on FanDuel, 14% of the top 150. So he's actually a little bit better in terms of the win rate than RJ is. Obviously, we're talking about different price points. We got to him a little bit less than we got to RJ. He's decently popular. We're below the field on Scotty on FanDuel, and I assume as well on DraftKings. Yep. About 10 points below the field on DraftKings. Given the win rates, though, I have no issues if you want a few additional shares of Scotty Barnes. Good enough option, 1.26 FanDuel points, 1.26 DraftKings points per minute. The price is high, but fine for a slate like this. So given where he's winning, it's still, I would want him. If I'm building a 150, I would want to be, kind of more in line with the Sims here. But if you see it the other way, if you see additional upside, one of the, higher ceiling players on the slate, I do think there's a little bit of extra room there where you can grab a few additional shares. Trey's just counting down numbers in the chat. What are these? What is this information you're giving me here, Trey? Is this ownership? I assume that's ownership that somebody's ownership that you're dropping in. Just taking a look at some of those now. I think we're pretty much in line. Do they have these same two guys as the ridiculous chalk at the top? Norm and Andre? I would think so. Luka coming through the Sims a lot better than he did yesterday. A lot more room for him today. 12-4 on FanDuel, 20.1% of the top, 20.1% win rate, and we got him at a 33% clip, which is nice to see. That's a decent chunk ahead of the field. We're in the teens ahead of the field on Luka on FanDuel. On DraftKings, 16.3% win rate, 14% of the top 150. Puts us probably more in line with the field. Yeah. Close to the field's ownership, little below, right about the same. But Luka looks like a very, very playable high-end option today. There's the 84.8 in 41 minutes last night. D'Lo looking kind of playable. Karis LeVert looking kind of playable. Again, I don't love this Cleveland-Chicago game. But LeVert, 5,900 shooting guard small forward, pulling an 18.3% win rate, 16% of the top 150 on FanDuel. At 5,300 on DraftKings, 22% winner, 28% of the top 150. Highly, highly playable. Around a point per minute for the season. Feel like we'll get a fair amount of pieces, outside of the top two here. The obvious, low-cost chalk guys. I think we'll get a few pieces out of the Lakers and Clips. D'Lo, 28% winner, 24% of the top 150 on FanDuel. And then looking really interesting on DraftKings, 7,200 point guard only, 19.7% win rate, but we got him 36% of the time. Which is Another solid chunk, mid-teens chunk on top of public ownership for D'Lo. So kind of an interesting spot to keep in mind for staying ahead of the field on. 1.07 DraftKings points per minute, put up 38 FanDuel points in 36.9 minutes the other night. Around a point per minute on the season, 22% usage. If you get a situation with no LeBron, you get a situation with no AD. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm going to make the assumption that his rates go up a little bit, and his usage goes up a little bit. But just in an who he is normal situation right now, he's projecting pretty well on both sides. Harden at 1.14 on the season, 1.16 on DraftKings. For the season with no Paul George, he's at 1.25 FanDuel, 1.30 DraftKings. Got him in that kind of territory, I believe. About in between. Potentially an extra half a point or so if we want to really nitpick it. I might give it to him. Yeah, I'm going to give Harden another fantasy point or so in the next update, just to put it a little bit closer to that season-long number, no Paul George. It's not going to change much. He already looks very playable on both sites. 23.5% win rate on FanDuel. Got to him just 12% of the time. Presumably a little bit popular. Yeah, his popularity is right around what his win rate is here. And we cut that about in half. But still looks very playable. 9,000 both guard spots. On DraftKings, 16.5% winner. We got to him less than that. Another one I'm going to make the presumption. Yeah, we're below the field on him on DK as well. But another spot. He just looks decent. The field on DraftKings is above his win rate, though. Just something to be wary of. At 8,400, his ownership is exceeding his win rate. So we'd rather be in this territory on Harden. Cut the field about in half on Harden exposure on DraftKings. Have them, but cut it down a little bit. On FanDuel, you want to probably also cut it in half. But I think there's a little bit more leeway on FanDuel because the win rate is right around his public popularity. So if you wanted to go up from here and approach the public popularity, I think you're okay. But this is probably, an undercut is probably still warranted. Jamal Murray, interesting spot there, basically doubling up his win rate in terms of exposure. 8,400, pretty good price for a 1.19 FanDuel point per minute player. 26.6% usage on the season. On DraftKings, 14.9% win rate, got to him 18% of the time. Not the big multiplier between the win rate and the exposure that we have on FanDuel for him. But that is definitely a little ahead of the field. Solid handful of points. Less than 10%, more than 5% ahead of the field. I like the win rate there. And then on the FanDuel side, we're probably a decent chunk ahead of the field on him, I'm going to guess. Oh, yeah. Yeah, FanDuel, we are more than doubling it. We're not tripling it, but we're a little bit more than doubling his popularity on the FanDuel slate. I kind of like that spot. KCP in that one. I like the price, $4,700, but I don't love the player for DFS. He comes through okay. I do like that we're getting him a fair amount less than that win rate looks like on both sites, really. It's probably over-owned for KCP. He's double the ownership of the next highest owned player on the Nuggets on DraftKings. And then on FanDuel, yeah, same story. I don't love that. I think I'm with the sim here where probably pays to be below the field's ridiculous numbers on KCP here. That said, I'm decently below that projection as well. The reason I say that about KCP, 0.64 per minute, 12.8% usage on the season. Let's see. Yeah, I don't see where they're getting him that far out ahead of where I've got him projected. It's not a crazy gap between where I have him and where the people providing this ownership have him. But the difference is probably driving some of that ownership expectation. Denver. Last 30 days, he's been a 0.59 per minute player in 228 minutes, 460 possessions. I think I've got him right in that territory. Yeah, I could put him back to around his season long rate. I'm still a little bit below. I might do that. You might see KCP pop up with another 1.5-ish, somewhere in there, between 1 and 2 extra fantasy points. It changes the trajectory of the play a little bit if I did that. What I don't like is that he's already simming out fairly well, and we're getting behind the field. I might leave it alone. I think doing that would probably just force a mediocre play when we don't necessarily want that. .71 per minute last year. He's never been elite, obviously, but he's been a little bit better than what he's been this season. Anybody got a strong KCP feel out there? Trav, I'm always a little bit thinking about back-to-back minutes, especially, a guy like Luka. He played, 41 last night? So it's in the back of the mind. It's just, what do you do to fill that gap, right? I don't necessarily think that it's correct to project it for lower, to just throw somebody else random minutes. It's also potentially a close game, only a 3-point spread, and they're on the road as road favorites. So I think the game environment informs that more than anything else. And it probably means that we're going to get, 36, somewhere in that territory. Even if he goes 34, he probably still looks fairly good on this slate. Obviously, that's a big dip from where we've got him now. Trey agrees. Trey's saying coming under the field on KCP if he's highly owned. Yeah, I think it's just a little bit of price driven around that shooting guard position. But the Sims are telling us to get below the field on him anyway. The difference there would be if I gave him an additional 3 points like other places are. That would normalize a little bit. I don't know that his win rate would go up like crazy, but I think that gap between the top 150 ownership and the win rate would close. A little bit anyway. So it's one to keep an eye on as we get closer to lock, whatever your process is. Just watch that. It might go up a little bit, but I do think that justifiably below the field on such a low-end fantasy performer makes a lot of sense in most cases. Bear with me one second. I just got to... Don't know what that means. Sorry for the sidetrack here. If a sec. Okay. I think somebody was asking about Goodwin. Mamba was asking about Goodwin. He's right here. 0.94 per minute. Gives you a lot more faith in the $4,400 range. He's only projected at 26 minutes right now, 15.9% win rate, 17% of your top 150, 13.8%, 14% of the top 150 on the DraftKings slate. And we've got a number of missing pieces and parts for them. Let me just double check what I did with that rotation. Okay. I just wanted to double check that I have both Kennard and Conchar out, and I do. Goodwin. Pretty popular looking. We are right about the field on FanDuel, and I think same story on DraftKings. Yeah, right about the field on the FanDuel slate, right about the field on DraftKings. I think it's a decent is who he is spot at worst for a $4,400, $4,000 point guard. The real question that it comes with, or the real hesitation that it comes with, I think is mostly around the game environment. Again, that's a game where we're talking about an 11.5 point underdog with a 209 point total. Memphis has a 98.75 implied total tonight. You don't see too many NBA teams in this day and age with an implied total below 100 points in any given game. So that comes with a lot of concern on that front. Nickeil Alexander-Walker on the other side of that same game, 4,300. He's right here. Same kind of mid-teens type results. I think they're both playable. Don't get me wrong. It's just price over minutes after a certain point, and you're gonna play in between a certain range of the per minute numbers. But not necessarily if you gave me equal guys. Like, do I prefer who's somewhat comparable? It's really all three of these guys I don't love. Obviously, we like Norm Powell better. 4,800 versus 4,700 there. On DraftKings, that's a more distinct play. Powell's at 48. Terrence Mann's at 44, where these guys are 42 and then 4,000 apiece. But there's still a very big gap there. If I'm picking between these three guys, I think it is probably Goodwin, despite what I said about the game environment, despite the slightly higher win rates for the other two. Just easily the best per minute guy in that group. But if I can forgo that game a little bit, just not all that appealing. Anthony Edwards not really coming through at all on the FanDuel slate. A little bit on DraftKings, though. 9.8% win rate, 16% of the top 150 at 8,900. If anybody's going to crack through for upside in this game, it would probably be Anthony Edwards. That said, he is questionable. Him and Rudy Gobert are both questionable. Only owns mid-single digits. So getting him with a plus 8 to 10 percentage points, not the worst option. If you're going to target a very low end game, you might as well target like the highest end per minute performer in that game, especially when he's going to be at low popularity. Vince Williams also coming out of that one. We are getting some pieces and parts from it. I'll give it that. 11.4% winner, 14% of the top 150 on FanDuel, just 8% and 5% on the DraftKings slate. So Vince looks like a much better option on FanDuel. He's in that middle of playability kind of a tier. Then we get into a lot of single-digit DraftKings guys that look a little bit more appealing on FanDuel. Io is single digits across the board. He's had a bunch of decent games lately. That said, the other night, just 31.2 in 38.5 minutes. For the season, 0.77 FanDuel points per minute, 15.9% usage. Those have both been a little bit higher over the last month or so. But not looking great. He's playable, more playable on DraftKings. He's easily playable on DraftKings, actually. A little bit harder to get to on FanDuel, a little bit harder to justify on FanDuel. Gary Trent, another piece from Toronto. that looks fairly decent. Quickly, we broke down with along with Scotty Barnes and RJ, but Gary Trent I left out of that at 5,100. He's got enough minutes there to support a little bit of upside. 9.4% winner on FanDuel, 12% of the top 150, and then across town on DraftKings, 8.4% winner, but just 3% of the top 150. It's probably going to put us a little below the field on Mr. Trent. Yep, a little bit below the field on Gary Trent on the DraftKings slate, but looks playable. Conley just never stops coming through on FanDuel in terms of our pre-slate sims. I don't feel like he wins all that many times on FanDuel when the night's over. But on this side a lot, Conley always looks pretty decent. 5,600 point guard only on FanDuel, 21.9% win rate, 27% of the top 150. On DraftKings, just 7% winner, 6% of the top 150. Not a full afterthought, but just kind of a playable veteran throw-in guy from the mid-range at 5,400. But fairly decent priority on the FanDuel slate. Ingram, like I mentioned, projects out fairly well. 1.13 FanDuel points per minute on the season, nearly 40 in 33 minutes the other night, a 27% usage rate. He's banged up, but I do like this New Orleans Indy game. Just need to find out who's going to be playing on the New Orleans side of it. But that is, again, our highest total game at 237.5. Should be a pretty decent pace. We've got New Orleans picking up, I think, 4. Yeah, New Orleans should pick up about 4 possessions. Somewhere around there. So I like the upside for the New Orleans side. It just depends on who's there and then, what kind of concentration do we get if somebody's missing. But I think there's room for Ingram. Obviously, we saw Zion up higher than this when we were on the front page. Kyrie on FanDuel also coming through a little bit. 19.3% winner, 18% of the top 150. Playable on DraftKings, 6% winner, but just 1% of our top 150 over there. So another guy I assume we're decently below the field. Feels not at 10%. Below 10, but more in line with the win rate, the top 1% rate on Kyrie. I don't really have too much of an issue if you want to grab a couple additional shares of him. He's obviously got some upside. 44 FanDuel points in 38.8 minutes the other night. Puts him roughly in this range, the 1.3, 1.28 per minute. But on the right night, you catch Kyrie, can definitely go off. If it's a situation where, for whatever reason, it's, hey, Luka, you went 41 last night. Kyrie played 3 fewer minutes last night, so we'll let Kyrie play 3 more tonight, and Luka gets a little bit of a blow at some point in the game. Maybe Kyrie sees a few additional minutes, sees a little bit of additional upside. Just thinking through that, back-to-back idea. But it's not like Kyrie's been the picture of hell throughout his career either, so I don't know that they're necessarily going to be running him into the ground either. I do think everybody on Dallas just kind of looks like who they are tonight, and in Luka's case, that looks very, very good. Right there. See what you guys are talking about. Yeah, Drummond's the top of the board, Ricky. We're just sorted to guards right now. But yeah, Drummond and Norm Powell, the top 2 players overall on the slate. I've got him at, I think it was 28 minutes. Yep, 28. I think that's probably about where we're going to be. 28 last time out, 14, 17, 28. 4 games ago, 16. What's the most he's gone this season? He's gotten into the 30s a few times. 31 minutes back on the 8th, 35 on the 6th. I think both of those are no Vooch games. And then he had back in early January a 30-minute game, and then his season high was 38 minutes back on the 26th of December. Let's see But again, 27, 46, call it 28 the other night, 28 a few games before that, 31, 35. So I do think there's room 28 to 30, maybe a little 30 plus if you're missing additional bodies. But to answer the question, Drummond already looks great. And if we give him more, it just pushes him up even more. Yeah, no Craig, no Patty Williams. There's a bunch of missing pieces and parts over there. So there's plenty of room. Getting back to the end of this guards rundown here. Let's see who else is distinct from site to site. Everybody here, single digits. So playable. There's a few playable guys. Donovan Mitchell, obviously always playable, always has star upside, a little bit of ceiling. 44 and change in 38 minutes the other night. He's been a 1.36, 1.39 per minute player. Both guard spots, 9,000 plus on both sites. Didn't really come through the Sims, but also didn't completely not come through. And I don't think he's crazy popular on either site. So it's just the low-end game environment that's a little bit of a pause there. Again, that one is 216. It's not quite the 209 that we're dealing with in the Memphis-Minnesota game, but it is one of the lower-end game environments on the board overall. But that said, Mitchell's owned at like half of these win rates. So I have no issues if you want to go double the field on Donovan Mitchell. You're still below 10%. Even if you wanted to take it up to 10%, it's not really advisable. But I'm not going to tell you it's a complete mistake because there is that ceiling there. CJ, if he plays, looks a little bit more playable on the FanDuel slate. 9.6% winner, just 4% of the top 150. I assume we're below the field there. Didn't really come through at all on DraftKings at 71. Tyrese, 5.7% winner, 2% of the top 150 on FanDuel. Didn't really hit very hard at all on DraftKings. He's another one I would throw into that pile of guys that's 1.45 per minute guy on the season, 1.48 on DraftKings. You can play Halliburton on pretty much any slate if you want to. It's just the Sims are telling us they're a better option for our money tonight. But having a couple shares of them, no issues with it. Nobody else really jumping out. Russ is playable on both sites, but not a priority. TJ McConnell, playable, but not a priority. Zaire Williams is a little interesting on FanDuel. 7.3% winner, 12.6% of the top 150 at small forward for 44. That said, again, I just don't love that game environment. You're not going to get a lot of successful pieces out of that one, unless it just goes completely a different direction than what all expectations are for that game. It could. You do see that happen from time to time, but odds are it's not gonna. So I don't love the idea of piling up, more than a couple of plays out of that spot. And with Zaire down here, it looks like we've got a few better options going up the board instead of him. Trent. Yeah, we talked about most of these guys. Kobe White. Don't think we mentioned him, but definitely looks playable on both. 11% winner on DraftKings, 15% on FanDuel, and we got to him 18% of the time on FanDuel. A little bit less, I think, than the field on DraftKings. So, as much as we like to talk about the game environments and everything, and I say we, I mean I, or like the industry at large, but you do see, given the pricing, given how the tectonics of the slate work, you do see a fair number of these guys on a 6-gamer, even from the low-end games, Cleveland, Chicago, Memphis, Minnesota. They do still hit the board. So it's not entirely about the game environment, obviously. Jump over the forwards. Yeah, Trey, exactly. That whole New Orleans team is questionable right now, so it's going to be interesting. Ricky, definitely, if both Ant and Gobert sit, I like the town spot quite a bit. Because you got to remember there's no slow-mo there. I assume if both those guys sit, there's also upside for Nas and the Jaden McDaniels of the world and whoever the hell else. let's see. If I suddenly dropped an additional 71 minutes into that group, yeah, we would have upside. You'd get a little bit more probably for Alexander Walker. You get a little bit more for Jaden McDaniels. Cat would probably go from like 34 to 36 minutes just because, and he would be the primary everything. And then down bench guys like Jordan McLaughlin getting 11 minutes right now would probably jump to the high teens somewhere around there. So that could potentially create some down bench value, some cheap guy value. Stephen Leibowitz, $25 fine for using a big word like tectonics. Anyone looked at D Rose? He's in here. He is definitely on this board somewhere. I think, probably in this territory. I know I saw him. I could just search for him. There he is. Didn't really hit. 15 minutes. Put up 12 fantasy points in 15 minutes the other night. 23 games on the season. He's averaging 17. Yeah, I don't know that we've got enough minutes overall to support it. Nah, it splits. I want the game logs. Bastard. Season high of 30 minutes back on December 13th. Missed a few dozen games, came back, played a couple, missed another few dozen games, came back, plays like every other day, plays about 14, 15, 16 minutes. I know there's a lot of missing pieces there, but I'm not sure that that's the spot for me. And again, it also does kind of go back to, all right, now we're talking about backup run for 15 to 18 minutes, even if he gets to like 22 with pieces missing there. We're talking about backup run in that low end game now. So yeah, I don't think that one's, I don't think the Derrick Rose plays for me, at least not how it looks right now. If we got some curveball, Derrick Rose starting, expected to play 28 minutes, then sure. He's what? Did I cut this back to forwards? I didn't. Where'd he go? 41 on FanDuel, 34 on DraftKings. He would definitely hit value on DraftKings, even in 34. If I gave him, let's see, 18 minutes would look like. I think he needs to play 20 minutes to have any kind of reasonable shot at paying off on DraftKings. At 41 on FanDuel, I feel like even at 20 is probably a little low. Yeah. Like I was saying, I don't love the idea of jumping into to backup minutes on a low end spot like that. Just to put that number that I gave before, 98.75 point implied total. The next lowest is 105 and a quarter. That's Chicago. Then 110. Both Cleveland and Minnesota at 110. And then we jump into 115s as the next lowest, 120s, 118s, just for the implied team total. So zeroing in on the lowest end team of the day with backup minutes, not to harp on your question. It was a good question and well worth exploring. I just don't think I'm there. Trailix Monte Morris at 33. I get behind that one a little bit more, I think. Yeah, if we get extra room there, I do think, well, Yeah, I could see him picking up more minutes. He went 27 in the last game. Conley only played 20. Why did Conley only play 20 in that game? Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Got me clicking all over the place now. Why is this out of line with... Popcorn Machine has him going 29 in that game. 27 the game before that. Where the hell did this 20 come from? Is this game just not on Popcorn Machine yet? Is that what it is? I think that's what it is. I think they're missing yesterday. Why did Conley only play 20 last night? Anybody know? I didn't catch that. Regardless, Trey, yeah, especially at 3,300, that gets interesting. With just 16 minutes right now, Monte Morris comes up 5.2% winner, 1.3% of the top 150. Obviously, if I gave him an additional 10 minutes, that would definitely spike. So that's one to keep an eye on. 0.87 points per minute over the full course of the season, around league average usage. Monte Morris is a good player and a decent fantasy asset at these prices. So, yeah, let's keep an eye on that, the ins, the outs there from Minnesota for sure. And, excuse me, I will try to double check that. Was it just blowout, Mike? Mike said blowout. I will definitely consider that as a possibility. I hate when they don't have these games up. And it's 114, 105. That said, they made it a lot closer in the fourth. Outscored them by 9 in the fourth quarter. So, yeah, you're probably right. Probably just decent lead going into the fourth quarter. I don't have the minutes run down in front of me, though. So, something to keep an eye on. And for sure, Monte Morris would be on that board if we get missing pieces and parts from Mini. Yeah, the 9-point makeup in the fourth quarter there definitely makes it look closer, Mike. Monte, Luka, and Kawhi. That's an interesting line, Trey. I don't dislike that. Let's get back to those forwards. Here's Kawhi right here. Not bad. 14.1% winner. 5% of the top 150. Just probably means he's a little bit popular there. Yep. We're about a third of the public popularity on Kawhi in the top 150. But he is definitely a good play. 1.25 on the season on FanDuel, 1.24 on the season on DraftKings. A little bit more than that with no Paul George. I still have them up here? I don't. $131 FanDuel, 126 DraftKings with no Paul George. So definitely some room here. I do think that you can go on DraftKings. You could probably get up to approaching the field, approaching that win rate if you wanted to. Field is right in this territory. No real issues with doing that. He looks like a good enough option. And then on FanDuel, 19.3% winner, 16% of the top 150. Definitely a piece over there. Somebody mentioned Lamar Stevens. Definitely looking pretty decent on both sites. 4,900 power forward only on FanDuel, 17% winner, 21% of the top 150. On DraftKings, power forward and center eligible for just 43, 21% winner, and landed in 39% of the top 150. Yowza. Another piece from that goddamn low-end game. I'm going to run the lineup, and it's going to come up with like 5 guys from that game now. Why is this? Oh, my God. I hate when things pop up message boxes and they won't go away, especially when they're completely irrelevant messages. Lamar. This is FanDuel. Yeah, we are well ahead of the field in that result on the DraftKings slate. FanDuel too. But this is a big chunk. This is one of our bigger, different from the field guys on the board right now. 1.05 DraftKings points per minute over the course of the season. Obviously, we're talking about fairly limited overall action. 23.5 minutes the other night. Put up 29 DraftKings points, or FanDuel points rather. Gets you within range, if not where you want to be, at 4,300. I don't love the game, but I do, again, there are definitely pieces and parts, and this is one of the more interesting ones considering where he's coming up win rate wise and versus the field. That's not bad. Zion looks very good, assuming he takes the court. 23.4% win rate, 36% of our top 150 on DraftKings, 27.3% on FanDuel, 48% of the top 150. Nobody's comparing with Norm Powell right now. We talked about him at the top of the show, but again, 4,800, plenty of minutes available. Lower end performer in a per minute sense. 0.78 FanDuel, 0.81 DraftKings. Not completely terrible, but not nearly elite by any means. That said, there is a little bit of usage. It's not one of these guys that's 0.7 and also just 12% usage. He's got a little bit more opportunity than that. I like the Norm Powell option. I have no issues if you wanted to dip down from the 90s to more, in line with that win rate. I think you're fine there. You're still ahead of the field there. But you're obviously closer. But the Sims like him. The Sims, you don't want to call it a lock at 4,800 by any means, but the Sims are getting close to lock territory. 93% of the top 150 on FanDuel, 83% of the top 150 on DraftKings. Aaron Gordon looks pretty decent. 6,400 at power forward only on FanDuel, 6,000 on DraftKings. Player I tend to touch on a decent amount when he lands at low prices, and that does look to be the case tonight. 0.93 per minute on FanDuel on the season, same rate on DraftKings. 17% usage, but does a lot of different things on the court. Good passer, good rebounder. 13% assist rate, 10.4% rebounding rate, 60% true shooting on the season. So when you get a guy like that in this price territory, I don't dislike the option. Getting him a little ahead of the field on both sites, a little ahead of the win rate, a little ahead of the field. There's plenty of room for Aaron Gordon today in the decent matchup there against Sacramento. On the other side of that game, Harrison Barnes also coming up pretty aggressively. Only 4,200, obviously plenty of minutes. But he is a fairly low-end guy most nights. 0.65 per minute, 14.6% usage. It's just price-driven. Price over minutes is getting Harrison Barnes there. Both forward spots on FanDuel. Same thing, 4,200, both forward spots on DraftKings. Comes up less at the same price on DK, obviously, against the lower cap. Looks playable on DK. Looks like a pretty strong option on FanDuel. LeBron's the opposite. Obviously from a different price tier. You're getting LeBron for only 91 on DraftKings today. Both forward spots, 1.40 DraftKings points per minute. This is a cheap price for that per minute rate. Like 91, you're paying 87 for Kawhi, who's giving you 1.2. You're paying 92 for Scotty Barnes, who's giving you 1.26. 89 for Anthony Edwards, who's giving you 1.26. 200 more, you get to LeBron at 1.4. Seems reasonable to me. Not the greatest matchup in the world going up against the Clippers, but we're talking about LeBron James. Even the older version of LeBron. You get this, you're sitting pretty at 91. 36 and change minutes the other night, 60 FanDuel points. 15 on top of his on top of around where he presumably was projected that night. Definitely take that. That's a nice little ceiling. On FanDuel at 10-2, it's not the same play. Just 2.3% winner, 2% of the top 150. I do think he can get there. I think he plays more as a luxury item on the FanDuel slate. And there's probably better places to go with your money on FanDuel. Like I'd rather go to Kawhi for 1,000 less. It's just a completely different scenario, site to site, given where he's priced. So LeBron on DraftKings, yes. On FanDuel, maybe a few shares, but not a priority. Cat looks good right now. 15% winner on DraftKings, sub 10% winner, but close to 10 on FanDuel. About half that in terms of the ownership. Below the field right now in both sites, but I have another spot. I have no real issues, especially if we get no Gobert, no Anthony Edwards. Then, I think that becomes even more of a smash spot. He's got power forward and center eligibility on both sites. Only 81 on DraftKings, only 85 on FanDuel. 1.17 per minute on FanDuel, 1.22 on DraftKings, and a 27% usage rate under normal circumstances. Not on the injury report at all today. Seems like it was just a day off yesterday. So I don't dislike the spot at all for Karl Anthony Towns. I think it's a spot that only could potentially get better. And here I am talking about yet another piece of that Minnesota-Memphis game. Yeah, Trey, I talked about Alexander Walker. He falls into that bucket of he was right in line with he's right here. He was right next to this is sorted out to everybody. That's right. Yeah, he was right next to KCP and Jordan Goodwin. I just couldn't remember who the other two guys that I was talking about at the time were. So between these three guys, as I was saying, I just in a just raw per minute scoring sense, I prefer Jordan Goodwin. It's probably Goodwin, then Alexander Walker, then KCP, but KCP gets way more minutes projected than those other two guys. But at 24 minutes, 4,300, Alexander Walker definitely hitting the board a little bit on FanDuel and right there on DK as well. So, yeah, definitely not a no. Not my most enthusiastic endorsement just because of 13.5% usage, 0.71 per minute on both sites. But price-wise, position-wise, he is getting there. He just comes with that usage and expectation asterisk. A lot of games like this, 29 minutes, 20.8 FanDuel points. Not going to get it done. But there is potential there. No worries, Trey. I know that especially when you the way that I do things and I'm jumping around and rambling and then changing subjects without giving any indication that I've done so, I get how you can miss some takes. Josh Green, not really on FanDuel, a little bit on DraftKings. 13% winner for 4,300. A lot of guys in that like 4,000 territory on DK today. 48, 43, 42, 4,000, 43, 36. There's not like the 95% owned $3,000 Deadman DeLon Wright type guy. There's a lot of spread across a lot of similar-ish looking options where you play a few shares of Lamar Stevens at power forward, you play a few shares of Harrison Barnes at power forward, just to use two examples from here, and they don't look all that different. I mean, there is a gap in terms of the exposure, but in terms of the win rate, you're talking about 6 percentage points of win rate there. There's a lot of interchangeable parts where we don't need to stack up four of these $4,000 guys where, two of them will probably do. And then you jump back into the mid-range and you get your stars. But I do think we are open to a couple of different approaches construction-wise when you think of it in terms of star scrubs or like mid-range, unless we get, we'll see how the lineups came together. I do think, these types of slates where it's good, not aggressively great value, do tend to, you can approach it either way. So we'll probably see a mix of balance and Starsy Scrubsy. And it just depends on your tolerance for how many of these $4,000 guys you want. I would tend, especially with a lot of them coming out of that Memphis, Minnesota low end game, where I don't necessarily expect multiple guys to hit the board. I think maybe a more balanced approach, if you like to think of it in those terms, probably is advisable. For now, we'll see how it changes. Aaron Nesmith hitting pretty hard on FanDuel, 38% across the board. 5,100 both forward spots. He's 5,400 on DraftKings, which explains the site-to-site discrepancy. 12.3% winner, 6% of the top 150. He's still playable over here, but he looks very, very good on FanDuel. And that's a decently high-end game that we haven't gotten enough of, in my opinion. Scotty, we talked about Trey Lyles on DraftKings, a little bit playable for 36. Not a huge projection, not a ton of minutes there, but at 36, power forward and center. With a little bit of price-based value. Looks like the field is probably a little aggressive on him, though. 12% win rate, got to him 5% of the time. And that is about half the field. I think that's about appropriate on a Trey Lyles. DeRozan, playable across the board, both sites. Looks better on DraftKings by a little bit than he does on FanDuel, but easily playable on both sites in that mediocre Cleveland-Chicago game. A couple differentiated pieces down here. Jaden McDaniels, who again only stands to improve if we lose a couple pieces from the Minnesota side there. At 41, both forward spots, 17% winner on FanDuel, 10% of the top 150. So already under the field, and I think he would probably only get more popular. But I think it's a situation where like his popularity goes up, but his value line would kind of intersect that at a point. The value line is more exponentially growth than the ownership. The ownership would just maintain a steady trajectory where his value would kind of crash through that. So there would be a crossover point where you just want him. He just becomes good chalk. The price is low enough that he would probably get there if he picks up just a few additional minutes, a little bit of additional expectation. But again, another guy, 0.65 per minute on the season, 15.4% usage rate for the season. Not the highest end player in the world. Ingram, we've talked about. Vooch is forward eligible on DraftKings, which makes him a little bit interesting. 5.6% winner, just 2% of the top 150. I don't mind the option. 1.13 DraftKings points. It's a little pricey probably for that, given how much value we've got at the position today. But in a different slate, I think this works for Vooch at this price with the power forward eligibility. Just the circumstances for this one, we've got a lot of options falling into those positions that are a little bit cheaper, a little bit mid-rangey. All single digits here, obviously. 14% for Michael Porter. Not the biggest MPJ fan in the world, but he's fine. I wouldn't mind having 10 to 14% of them. 21.9 FanDuel points in 32 minutes the other night. Obviously doesn't get you there. 0.92 on the season. Just under 20% usage. He's okay. He's an okay mid-range guy. I prefer Aaron Gordon if I'm going to that Denver team, though, at the forward spot. Gordon being right here. So there's a pretty decent dip down MPJ down here. Herb Jones. Another guy could potentially benefit from some missing bodies in New Orleans. 18% winner right now, 18% of the top 150. On DraftKings, he didn't get there at all at 5,900. 6,000 on FanDuel works really well for him. 59 on DraftKings doesn't work for him at all. Najee Marshall, only 16 minutes right now, not hitting the board really at all on either site. Another guy maybe finds a few minutes if we miss some bodies out of that one. Trey not hitting the board right now at all and potentially not going to play. Don't really see. I mean, maybe if we got Trey, no Ingram, no Zion, then Trey would go up. Otherwise, we're dealing with just Trey like this if he even plays. Oh, and PJ hiding down here. Wow, that's a price discrepancy and a half. 5,800 on DraftKings. 0.2% win rate. 0% of the top 150. At 5,800. On FanDuel, he's only 5,000. 19.7% win rate. 12% of the top 150. 0.88 per minute on the season. Since joining Dallas. I could just jump to my sheet here. Let's see. I think I put him right at the rate. Oh, that's right. He's been lower than that. So I split the difference. That's right. Since joining Dallas, he's been in the 0.66 territory versus the 0.8 territory. I've got him at 0.72 for tonight, and he looks that good. I think there's additional upside beyond the lower end performances that we've gotten out of him, given the 0.87 that he was playing at earlier in the season. So I don't dislike that option on FanDuel. On DraftKings, it doesn't really work. But on FanDuel for only $5, that's not bad. I expect we'll get a fair share of power forward PJ. I don't know how much he hits the center spot. $5.49, 7:30 start time. Take a second to see if a spot opened up in that tournament. Just got to catch that one person who cancels. Probably not going to happen in a tournament like that. That's the one thing. If you miss like the main, the low cost tournaments, there's people jumping in and out of those all the time. So you can grab a few lineups even if you miss, miss when it fills. The bigger buy-in ones, people tend to mean what they say when they buy into those. So you don't get as many cancellations. So if you miss it, you kind of missed it, which sucks. That pissed me off before the show when I saw that. Especially because I was looking at it last night, and in my head, I said, that's going to fill during the afternoon, and you're going to miss it, so put a lineup in now. And then I put my phone down and went about my night and didn't do it. Typical. Center spot, Andre Drummond dominating the top of the board. 70% of the top 150 on DraftKings, 65% of the top 150 on FanDuel right now. 28 minutes, we talked about him before, potentially could go up a little bit more. See more than 30 minutes, just would get aggressively better and better. 1.39 points per minute on the season on FanDuel, 1.35 per minute on the season on DraftKings, 35 FanDuel points in 28 minutes the other night. I think you're looking at a reasonable expectation in this territory again. Got him projected a little bit lower than that, but plenty of upside here. It is not the easiest front court matchup in the world, but given what Andre Drummond does, it's not even like on the right night, just whenever he takes the court. Andre Drummond typically puts up some pretty aggressively strong big man numbers, some strong fantasy rates. So I'm not that hesitant to roll him out in this spot, and he's just priced really, really well. 5,900, 5,200. Like I said at the top of the show, it's not the $4,000 or $3,000 Andre Drummond where you got him. There was expectation of him getting no minutes and he jumped into a starting role. That's not the situation we're dealing with tonight. But you can still see, even at these prices, we're talking about 5.59 points per dollar on FanDuel, 6+ on DraftKings. I think that's probably our best of the day, is it? Yeah, 618. Best points per dollar of the day, slightly better than $4,800 Norm Powell on DraftKings. And second best of the day probably on FanDuel. Yep. When in doubt, that points per dollar number can be a reasonable guide rail. Not always, because ownership factors in, positioning factors in. Like you can see, this is a great example because he's not that valuable on FanDuel. I mean, you do see that it goes in something of a straight line. But like here, 4.86 per dollar outpaces still in the Sims some of these 5+ ones. But it is a good, shorthand. If you're in a pinch, you got to figure something out. Just look at the points per dollar and it can inform you fairly well about what's going on. Cat, we've talked about a few times. Looks playable at worst, decent, and only could trend upward. Zubac is questionable. 9% winner right now on FanDuel, 8% of the top 150. On DraftKings, we get him a little bit more. Nearly an 18% win rate, 16.6% of the top 150. Only 5,600 over there. Not a bad option. 1.05 per minute. 33 minutes the other night. Put up just 25 FanDuel points. But we know there's a little bit of ceiling there for Vooch, or for Zub, rather Zubac. Anthony Davis on the other side of that one. He's probable. It's the usual situation. I expect both of them to be out there. 11.7% winner on FanDuel for 11.2, just 8% of the top 150. Does fall into that luxury item kind of a category on the FanDuel slate anyway. 11.2 over there versus 9,800 on DraftKings. That's another big price discrepancy. And you can see it in the results. 20% of the top 150 stretching out ahead of that win rate, 14% win rate. And that's got to be ahead of the public ownership. Actually, that's right on the public ownership. I'm surprised. I would have thought that would have driven them a little bit higher than the public. Public's like right at this number. I have no issue being there with the public. But you do typically, it's a little bit of a warning when that win rate is already below the public exposure. Maybe not a spot, even though he does look pretty good at that price. Maybe not a spot to go running and grabbing a bunch of additional shares. Be around the field and you're fine on AD. Unless you get a changing situation there. I think around the field at most is probably correct. And if you wanted to zero it into like around this win rate, 15-ish% on DraftKings, I think you're probably doing the right thing there. Good as he looks. On FanDuel, we're about half the ownership already, so it's not really an issue. This is interesting though. I think I'd rather be a little below the field, closer to that win rate. It's a matter of only a few shares, only a few points, so it doesn't really have a crazy impact. But I don't love getting way, out ahead of the win rate when I'm holding hands with a bunch of people. And that would be the situation on AD tonight. Jokic looks definitely playable for 11.7, 9.7% winner on DraftKings, 11.3% of the top 150. That said, we were getting better numbers on Luka. But we would be, if we got 11% of Jokic, we would be a pretty nice chunk ahead of the field. He's projected for low single digits ownership. So it's not exactly like that Luka spot that I talked about last night because we are getting some of them and he does look okay in the Sims. But with the field so low, that's a spot where I wouldn't necessarily mind getting a little bit more of them. It doesn't exactly work the same way. Even though the exposure right now is above the win rate, with the field not there at all, you're just creating a little bit more of a gap there on the best or the second best potential fantasy performer on the day. So I do think there's a little bit of additional room on Jokic. On FanDuel, 2% of the top 150 against a 6% win rate. Oh, sorry guys, I screwed that up. I had the sites reversed on what I was saying there. Jokic's exposure on DraftKings is closer to this win rate. So we are ahead of the field, but it's not as low as I thought it was. I was looking at the FanDuel ownership. The FanDuel ownership is basically around where we are. You do have a little bit of room there against the win rate, but not against the public ownership. I think it's probably appropriate to keep them fairly lower owned on FanDuel, but obviously you do have that star power upside like we saw with Luka last night. On DraftKings, as I was saying, the exposure is right around this win rate. So you can take a few additional shares. Even if you pushed it out to 15-ish%, I don't really have an issue with that. I think you're okay. But it's not as enthusiastic when I thought he was owned at 2% on DraftKings. Gobert, if he plays, looks all right. Basically an 8% win rate, 11% exposure on DraftKings, and reversed on FanDuel, 10.4% winner, 8% exposure. Sabonis, another is who he is, spot 10-6 center and power forward on FanDuel. Just cracking into double digits in both categories on DraftKings. Slightly below 10% in terms of win rate. Just a 6% exposure at 10-3 center only. It's a little bit below the field. Basically half the field. Jared Allen on the other side of that Cleveland-Chicago front court showdown. 13.3% exposure in the top 150 against a 14% win rate on FanDuel. Doesn't look nearly as good on DraftKings for 61. For 74. 5.21% win rate, 8% of the top 150. Still playable. A good per minute performer, 1.16 per minute on DraftKings, 1.18 on FanDuel. That said, it's... If I've got to pick a side, even though I was saying, it does come for Andre Drummond, there is the matchup. If I got to pick a side in that showdown, I think I'm taking the side that has Andre Drummond on it. But it could be a situation where they all just, get theirs against one another and nobody really dominates in terms of, the big man numbers. Mobley's right here. Just 0.7% winner on FanDuel, 0% of the top 150. On DraftKings, 1.4%, 2.6%. An afterthought on DraftKings and not really a thought at all on FanDuel. Miles Turner's playable on the FanDuel slate, less so on DraftKings, but he's there. Triple J not really coming through. We talked about Triple J yesterday, and it holds up. The dip in the fantasy point output is it's kind of concerning, and the price. I feel like the price hasn't really come down, commensurate with the dip in output. It's probably partly because the usage is still there. He's still pushing nearly a 30% usage rate for the season, but he's down at 1.17 per minute on both sites. Last year, this was in like the 1.3 range. I forget what the exact number when we looked at it yesterday. But there's been a big dip there. What's up, Immense Evans? Appreciate you, buddy. Glad you found us. Glad you started doing your own thing. Used to see you over on Stochastic DFS. Had to subscribe. I appreciate that. Hit the like button, the subscribe button, all those things. I don't think I've asked for that once all week long, including last week. I know we're only on Wednesday. I don't typically harangue everybody for likes and subscriptions and everything, but subscribe so you know when we go live. We do have pretty variable show times, and hit the like button because it feeds the algorithm. But yeah, Evan, I'm glad you're here. We've been doing this we're coming up on a year. It was opening day of baseball season last year, so we are coming up on a year of content already. Crazy. But yeah, it's been a blast, and I'm glad you're here, and come on back. What else we got? Daniel Theis, 5% winner on FanDuel at the Dead Min. I don't think I'm going there. Just 0.67% of our top 150. Basically, we got him once against a 5% win rate in the top 150. Probably some better options. But PJ, again, down the bottom of the board there on the page that you guys can see, line 102. On FanDuel, PJ looks pretty solid with upside because I've got him cut below what his season-long number is by like a tenth of a fantasy point per minute. Not at all on DraftKings, but on FanDuel for 5,000 power forward and center, PJ is kind of interesting. Let's get out of this. We're coming up on 6 o'clock. I know it's a 7:30 start, but I do want to have a little time. Take a look at some lineups. For Immense Evans, who hasn't been here, we get our sims that we're about to see and all the numbers that we've been talking about through the show, all these sim results, from a site called acemind.io. Some good guys that you may know from back in the Stochastic days created AceMind. And you can check it out at acemind.io. They've got sims, they've got an optimizer. PGA, NFL, NBA, MMA, MLB coming very soon. I know they're working on some other stuff as well. I don't want to make any promises about that, but I know they're working on some stuff. Let's take a look at DraftKings. And of course, total curveballs in that first lineup with TJ McConnell in that spot. But we did get to LeBron. We talked about how cheap LeBron was. That's a pretty aggressive run of Andre Drummond. Fair amount of Zion and some Lamar Stevens mixed in there. Good amount of Aaron Gordon, ton obviously of Norm Powell. Some over here, some over there, but he's going to be in most of these. I wasn't expecting to see TJ McConnell in that first one. That threw me. Goodwin we talked about. Terrence Mann. We do get a few of our Luka winners up at the very top of the top 150 here, which is always good to see that they actually pay off and hit the board aggressively when they do get there. Same thing with Jokic, actually. With his fewer shares, they were still aggressively good. We're mostly taking our like mid-range value play obviously out of center with Drummond. And then small forward or forward, depending on how you want to position Norm Powell. Shooting guard or guard, depending on how you want to position Terrence Mann. Point guard or shooting guard. I kind of like the idea of a spendy point guard spot, just given how some of these lineups look. Luka, Donovan Mitchell, Terrence Mann, Norm Powell, spendy power forward, Andre Drummond, mid, some of these names work. D'Lo, Russ, Edwards if you could get there, obviously Harden if you could get there. So there's a reasonable amount of spend at your guard spot. Reasonable amount of mid-range Aaron Gordon type fits perfectly at forward. I like how these lineups are coming together, and they are. It kind of jives with what I was saying, right? We've got a mix of a little more Starsy Scrubsy leaning or a little bit more balanced leaning, depending on whether we got to like Luka and or Jokic. But there's room to go either way. Come on. Yeah, there's a good amount of money on the board here. So you can get like a look at D'Lo, Gordon. I think I prefer the balance constructions a little bit. It's very, very close. But like that top line, leaving off TJ McConnell, not entirely because he obviously got there, but he's not like one of the key plays of the day. But Terrence Mann, LeBron, Gordon, Drummond, Harden, Powell, Gobert. Or like that next one down, Goodwin, Herter, Anthony Edwards, Zion, Andre Drummond, Norm Powell, Harrison Barnes, Anthony Davis. I think they play a little bit stronger than like Luka, Io, Norm, Lamar Stevens, Andre Drummond, Terrence Mann, Aaron Gordon, D'Lo. I feel like that one's missing a higher end name. Were the slightly more balanced ones. And it's like the Jokic one. Jokic, Powell, Russ, Drummond, Zion, Karis LeVert. That one's feels a little better. And I know, it's not the correct way to necessarily do this in terms of name recognition, but as I'm saying these things, I am thinking about the actual values of the players. And obviously we're dealing with, these are the top lineups that came through. So again, either construction is viable, just in a personal preference kind of a thing, and the way that I think the slate works a little bit better. I think I prefer a little bit more balance. So Spence saying Fox, Mann, Powell, Towns, Drummond, Morris, LeBron, Mathurin winning that 100K. Go get it, buddy. Love it. Kevin O, thank you, pal. MLB content great last season. I appreciate that. Plan on coming back and having it be great again this season. Can't wait. Maxi Kleber ruled out. Okay. It's interesting. Wasn't he probable? Was he probable or questionable? Not that it matters. Oh, he was doubtful. That's right. That's right. Did I even project him? I don't think I did. Yep. No change there. Already had Maxi out. Where were we? Yeah, so I think that's our rundown on DK. There's top lineups. Bringing it back. I want a bet. 212 against your $4. Not bad at all. jump over to FanDuel, and we'll wrap this thing up. acemine.io one more time for the sim results for all your lineup building and simulation needs. FanDuel looking pretty good at point guard in terms of like spendy / one spendy guy, one mid-range guy. Luka, Jamal Murray, Luka, Kobe White, Luka, De'Aaron Fox, D'Lo. Good blend of guys at the point. We're going to see a good amount of Norm Powell and Terrence Mann combos. Norm Powell, Herb Jones. Terrence Mann, Norm Powell. Both of those guys will hit a lot. So it looks like we're mostly extracting value from shooting guard on the FanDuel slate. One small forward value spot, one small forward mid type guy. All right, Scotty Barnes, the higher end players, Kawhi. Those guys aren't mid. Those guys are higher end. So it's double relatively spendy. Double good players, let's call it, at point guard. Mostly value, but you could go value, good player, and then value. But it looks like more of these go like value at shooting guard, and then get a good player at small forward with a mid type guy or another value. Seems to be the better construction there. And then pretty reasonable at power forward, Zion AG, Ingram Zion, we'll see who plays. There are some of these spots, though, where we're getting a star and a Lamar Stevens, an Aaron Gordon, and a Jaden McDaniels. But I think we've got room to spend. This one's got Sabonis and Zion in it. And then it's just Andre Drummond Day down the board at center. A few other guys creeping in, but it's primarily Andre Drummond Day. Fairly straightforward. Good amount of RJ hitting the board. Not the top lineups necessarily. Let's see, where's his first one here? But he's there. Looks like he's getting there. Him and Scotty getting there a little bit on FanDuel. Oh no, there's one. So him and Scotty getting there a little bit on the FanDuel slate. Not really IQ. Harden definitely is popping up a good amount. I love how much we're seeing Luka. One that we don't see at all on FanDuel is Jokic, which kind of jibed with what we saw in the results. Here's one. But you got to go down the board, 40 lineups or so? Top of the board on FanDuel, bringing you back $200, $219 on your 15. A little different. The other one was 200 plus on your 4. In a much bigger field, too. Only 15,000 entries in this one. That DraftKings one had 100,000 entries. A little bit different site to site today. Were you guys not able to see that whole time, or did that just go away because I minimized it? I think it just went away because I minimized it. Whew. Think that's about it, gang. Hour and 40-ish, hour 38 into the show. Got some updating to do. Going to tighten up some of the projections that we talked about. Some of the, the slight changes that I wanted to make. We'll get those things tightened up a little bit. Get an update on the site by, let's call it 6:30 or so. Give you an hour before lock time. Hopefully I managed to get my lineup into the big contest. Doesn't look like there's any spots yet. As I've been on the show, I've probably missed like 4 or 5 opportunities to jump in. But that's okay. We'll just keep on monitoring. With that in mind, guys, good luck out there tonight. Thursday, tomorrow, coming back for full rundown on whatever's going on. What's the slate look like tomorrow? It's 8-gamer tomorrow, potentially. Might be 8, might be 6. We've got 6 games between 7 and 9, and then a 10 o'clock and a 10:30. Friday has, for that DraftKings no late swap, there's only 2 late games on that slate, funnily. We've got, 7 games that start between 7 and 8 o'clock, and then a 10 o'clock and a 10:30. So it is kind of ideal to do it in terms of the gap, the 2-hour gap between games, but only having 2 versus a slate the other day where we had 4 late games. Just kind of a oddball to put it on. But anyway, that'll be an interesting experiment. I think we've said all we can say today, so I will just leave you guys with good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. Right back here tomorrow to break down the Thursday slate. I'll see you.